Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday, March 17th, and this is our Ed Puzzle lesson for today. We have no warm up because there is no live class, so let's go ahead and move on. Our announcements, simple, very similar to yesterday. Again, we have homework help. You know that happens on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. It is a Zoom link. You know that link is in our announcements. Please make sure you go to the announcements in English or history. Click on that announcement, click on the title, then the text will open up and you will find that Zoom link. And you can join if you have any questions or need help with anything. Please remember to turn in your assignments even if they are late. All right. That is going to give you some credit, and that is better than no credits. You know that today is a Wednesday Ed Puzzle lesson. That's why you are such a good student and watching the video right now. Spring break is going to be happening in about 2 weeks, week and a half or so. When we come back, we are going to be very much focusing on the SBAC testing. For SBAC, you are coming in physically from what I understand. Now, remember, when you need that information, I will send that information. So I'm sure with all of my teacher meetings that are going to be happening through the day on Wednesday, I will find more information. But remember, school is always going to send your parents emails. So make sure your parents are checking their emails. As soon as the information becomes available, I will send it to you and share it with you. Okay. All right, so again, if you have any questions about our announcements, please message me on Canvas, or if you have questions in general, or on Remind, or you can email me as well. And you always know where my email is. It is on the front page of our English and our history pages. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and go back to our main page. So you need these materials today. Please make sure that you are ready to go. You need your performance coach, historical text. It is useful to have your notes. It is also the point to have your practice packet. Sorry, I had that open for an activity we're going to do later. A Wave of Immigration in the Late 1800s in the United States. This is an article that we have been breaking down in class over the past few days, and it is the front page of our practice packet for historical text. All right, so make sure you have those two resources. Make sure you of your semester 2 composition book. That's what these two abbreviations are. So SEM is often an abbreviation for semester, and COMP is often an abbreviation for composition. So your composition book, notebook. And you are going to need two colors. Those two colors are going to be for our grammar notes. Again, you can use the same two colors that you used not last week, excuse me, yesterday or the day before. If you use two different colors, that's okay. But to make things more organized, I would suggest using whatever colors you used the past few days in your lesson 22 grammar notes. All righty, so let's go ahead and get started. First things first, we're going to be finishing our grammar lesson 22 notes on linking verbs. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Again, if it ever feels like I'm going too fast or you're not ready to move on, go ahead and pause the video and press play when you do have everything in front of you and when you are ready to go. All right. You have pressed play, you have all of your materials around you, and you are ready for our lesson today. All right, so let's go ahead and finish this up. So we've been talking about linking verbs over the past few days, and we already know a bit about linking verbs, right? From when we were discussing the parts of speech notes from our reference section. And we that linking verbs help connect ideas. And we learned now that linking verbs do not show action and they don't help the action verb at all, really, right? There is no time for the action to happen because the linking verb is just helping to link ideas, descriptions, or titles to a subject. And we saw that in our two examples here. And just the other day, we had this small note that we added, reminding ourselves that some words can do more than one job. Right? So a linking verb can sometimes be an action verb, or it can be a linking verb. But remember, the good thing to remember is that each verb can only do one job at a time. So whenever you look at one sentence, that verb is either an action verb or a linking verb. All right, so let's go ahead and move on in our notes. Now we're going to be thinking about how do we identify a linking verb. There is a really awesome trick that we're going to talk about today. All right, so first things first, go ahead and make sure you have things to write with. You already did that. So let's go ahead and skip a line. And we're going to give ourselves another little section over here on the left-hand side. And we're going to write common linking verbs. Go ahead and underline that. Again, if it ever feels like I'm going too fast, this is a video, so you can pause it until you're caught up and then press play. All right, so there are a few common linking verbs. So whenever you see these common linking verbs, ask yourself in a sentence, right? Ask yourself, is it linking to things or is it the action? And then we will figure out, we'll know which job that verb is doing. Okay, so the common linking verbs to look out for are going to be all of the to be verbs. So let's go ahead and give ourselves a bullet point. Okay, all of the to be verbs. Now, up until now, we really had only focused on 5 of the forms of the verb to be, but there are actually 8 altogether. So let's go ahead and give ourselves a letter 8 and put that in parentheses. All right, so let's go ahead and write those out. What are all 8 of these linking verbs? Sorry, all 8 of the to be verbs. We have is, comma, am, comma, are. These are the 3 we are most familiar with. We have our past tense, was, were. And these are the 5 that we had been talking about a week or 2 ago. And now let's go ahead and finish off with our last 3 forms of the to be helping verb, sorry, the to be verb. Be, being, and been. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All 8 of these are able to do multiple jobs, but remember, you can only do one job at a time. Okay, so go ahead and give yourself another bullet point. Now we have 5 common linking verbs that have to do usually with our 5 senses, right? So let's go ahead and write 5 senses. This is just a way for us to help remember some of these common helping verbs. So as humans, we have at least 5 senses usually, right? You are using 2 of them right now just to watch and listen to this video. So to watch a video, which sense are you using? You're using your eyes, right? So one common linking verb is look. And all of its forms, right? Looks, looking, looks, looking, looked. And to hear this video, what sense are you using? You are using your ears, right? So sound is another common linking verb. That sounds fun. Is it fun or does it just sound fun? Right? Okay, so let's go ahead and think about our other 3 senses. Now, I always talk about trying to convince your parents to take you out to ice cream. And what do you do when you eat ice cream? What sense are you using? You are using your taste, right? And that happens to be one of our common linking verbs. All right, with your hand, you are writing. What does that mean? What sense are you using? You are using your touch or to feel something, right? And our last one, the one we never use when we watch a video usually is smell. So it just happens to be that there are 5 linking verbs, common linking verbs that relate to our five senses. I thought that was a nice memory trick. So we're going to go ahead and use that to help us remember. So we have our 8 to be helping verbs. Sorry, I keep saying helping. We have our 8 to be verbs, the form of the verb to be. We have our five senses, and we have 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have 6 other common linking verbs. We have the verb seem. Got a little excited there. SEEM. Appear. Grow. Become. And remember, all of these verbs have many forms, right? Now, these verbs are mostly regular verbs. So if I wanted to make the word seem into the past tense, I would say seemed. So I would add an E and a D to it, right? Now, the to be verb is highly irregular. All 8 of those forms look different from each other. So again, these common helping verbs, so I keep saying helping, these common linking verbs are mostly regular verbs. So when we say become, now become is irregular, but became is a form of the verb to become. But most of these are pretty regular, or at least they're not as irregular as the to be verb. Remain, and our last common linking verb is to stay. All right, so all together we have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, so there are 19 common helping verbs total. So let's go ahead and write that up here. 19 total. Again, if it ever feels like I'm going too fast, just pause the video and catch up, and then you can press play again. Okay, so again, whenever you see any of these verbs in a sentence, you have to ask yourself, which job is that verb doing? Is that verb acting to show us the action, or is that verb, is its job to link the subject with a description, like Jill looks sick, or the subject with the title, Ray is a policeman, right? Okay, so whenever you see these common helping verbs, ask yourself, which job is it doing? Action or linking? All right, so now we're going to talk about that cool trick, identifying linking verbs. Let's go ahead and skip a line and write identifying linking verbs. Underline that subtitle for this section. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move down a little bit. All right, so this is a really great trick to figure out which job is this verb doing. Is it action or linking? All right, so I have to adjust myself. To tell whether a verb is a linking. To tell whether a verb is a linking verb, we replace it with a form of the verb to be. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say put a bullet point there. So let's go ahead and create a second bullet point. And again, there are 8 forms of the verb to be. So let's just remind ourselves there are 8 total. And you could even draw an arrow up to these guys if you like. Because all 8 of them are here. Okay, and give yourself a second bullet point. If the sentence, so we're going to take linking verb in a sentence, or take the verb in a sentence, and to figure if it is linking, we're going to replace that verb with one of the forms of the verb to be. Once we replace that verb as conducting the test, if the sentence still makes sense, excuse me, S-E-N-S-E. If the sentence still makes sense logically, then the verb is a linking verb. Give yourselves another bullet point. If the sentence does not make sense, if it no longer is a sentence that flows and works and is grammatically correct, then we know that the verb we were testing is not a linking verb. Now I have about 3 lines left on my page. Now let's say that somewhere here you ran out of space. Go ahead and make sure that you are finishing these notes. Oh, this is very, very stiff paper on the back side of whatever page you are writing. If 3 more lines or so, then you're set, you're ready. If you're already on the back of your page, awesome, you're good. Let's go ahead and write an EX over here on the left. Now we're actually going to go to the middle of the page, as close to the middle as you can get, kind of draw a little squiggly line. We're going to have example 1 and example 2, or an example on the left and an example on the right. These are pretty short sentences, so we are okay to test them this way. All right, on the left-hand side, let's go ahead and write our first example. The fireman feels anxious. Now, the fireman can be feeling anything, right? Scared, happy, sad. The word anxious just describes an emotion. All right, and then over here on the right-hand side, the fireman feels the heat. And I have a little bit, there we go, just to make sure that my notes are separated from my example. All right, again, if it feels like I'm going too fast, pause the video until you're caught up, and then press play when you are ready. All right, so let's go ahead and conduct our test. So to tell whether a verb is a linking verb, we're going to replace it with a form of the verb to be. So we have 2 different ways that we used the word feels here. And we know that feel is one of our common helping verbs. So we know that this verb is able to multiple jobs. So we're trying to figure out, is it an action? Is it showing, or is it linking the subject to a description or to a title? So let's conduct this test. So we're going to replace the word feels with one of the to be helping verbs. So let's go ahead and write that down. I'm going to go ahead and use one of my colors from yesterday. I'm going to use that blue color. I'm not going to use the blue. I'm going to use purple. Okay, so this is our test. The fireman is, and is one of our 8 to be verbs. The fireman is anxious, or is sad, or is happy. The fireman is happy. The fireman is sad. Anxious is just another emotion. So if the sentence still makes sense, then it is linking verb. The fireman is anxious. Does this sentence make sense? The fireman is happy. The fireman is sad. That checks out. That's good. All right. So then this example, feels is a linking verb. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a check. Is a linking verb. Yes. All right. Let's go ahead and conduct our second test over here on the right-hand side. And again, we're going to take the linking verb feels, and we're going to replace it with one of our 8 forms of the verb to be. So the fireman, let's go ahead and use the same form. We'll use is. The fireman is the heat. That doesn't make any sense, right? The fireman feels the heat of the fire, right? So the fireman is the heat. I mean, if we were writing a song, maybe that would make sense. But in normal grammar world, the fireman is the fireman is not the heat, right? The fireman is not the heat of the fire. Okay, so then we know that this is not a linking verb. So this verb feels is not performing the job of linking. This is performing an action, right? So the fireman can literally feel the heat of the fire, maybe on his skin, right? Or on his hands or in his boots. So we know this is not a linking verb. All right, again, if I went too fast or if you need a moment to finish writing, pause the video and finish your notes. You have pressed play. You have finished your notes. Excellent. And if you did not finish your notes and you're freaking out, pause the video and rewind a little bit. Okay, it's still right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn the page. And we are going to, in the top left-hand corner or wherever you are, let's say you're already on the back of your page, go ahead and skip a line and write the word practice. Okay, so our practice is going to be on page 106. I lied, 107. Where did I put you? Oh my, aha, found it. So your practice is on page 107. And we're not going through A, we're not going through B. You will have to list all of our common linking verbs though. Okay. For your practice, for your review questions coming up. So you're going to be working on C through J. So C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. All right, and what is our job here? We're going to find the linking verbs, if any. So remember, at the bottom of our notes, we talked about this test we can do. Is this a linking verb or is it not a linking verb? So when we conduct that test, sometimes there is no linking verb in a sentence. So maybe some of these examples, there won't be a linking verb. You'll have to tell me based on the test that you conduct. All right, so again, page 107, you're looking at C through J. So C is in candy to J is in jazz. Yeah, jazz. All right, and just 5 more questions. You're looking at page 108. So you're going to flip to the next page. And you're going to, we're on page 108, go all the way down. You won't do those. You're down here. 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. What do I want you to do here? You're going to tell me whether each of the verbs that are underlined, are those verbs acting as action verbs? What job are they doing? Or are they linking verbs? Now you'll notice that I am writing on a handout. This is a piece of paper that I have copied. I am not writing in my book. You will not write in your textbook. Okay, you're only writing on your paper or in your notebook or on a separate piece of paper. Okay, so here we're trying to figure out what job is the verb doing. Is it action or linking? It can only do one job though, right? Oops. All right, so 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So on page 108, looking at number 16 to 20. All righty, so as you are working on these questions, you are going to go ahead and put your answers into our Canvas assignment. Now, before we go forward, I actually want to go ahead and practice a few of these with you. So we are going to go ahead and look at C. So again, we're trying to figure out if there are any linking verbs, right? And again, how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by conducting this test that we learned about at the very end of our notes. So how do we tell? How do we identify a linking verb? All right, so let's check out C. The farm workers became poorer under Diaz's leadership. By the way, our grammar book has come back to its love of Latin American history, which I support. That's awesome. But that's where our names are coming from. And that's what's going on here. So now we're talking about Zapata and Diaz. All right, so let's check this out. The farm workers became poorer under Diaz's leadership. Now, think about our common helping verbs. Which common helping verb, helping, I keep saying helping, which common linking verb do you see in this sentence in C? All right, you should have answered our Edpuzzle question. I was sneaky and I put a question in there, so you had to answer the question in real time. And you answered became, right? Excellent. I knew you would because you are all smart. And I think you all are very, very capable of doing all of these things. Okay, so we're looking at this verb and we have to test it first. So we're going to replace it with one of the to be helping verbs because that is what we need to do when we are trying to tell, is it an action or is it linking? So we're going to replace it with one of our 8 to be verbs. Okay, check it out. The farm workers, now this is in the past tense, so let's use were. Okay, let's go ahead and read this together. Again, I am writing on a handout, on a copy. All right, do not write in your book. Okay, just a reminder. All right, let's check it out. The farm workers were poorer under Diaz's leadership. Does that make sense? Does that sound like a normal sentence that someone could write or a normal sentence that you might see in a history book? The farm workers were poorer under Diaz's leadership. Yes, yes, that passes the test. So if this sentence still makes sense, it is a linking verb. Ta-da! All right, so our linking verb is actually became. It is a linking verb. It passed the test. All right, let's go ahead and do one more question together. Diaz's treatment of the Yoques Indians was cruel and vicious. All right, let's check that out together. So we're looking again, thinking about our common linking verbs. Which one of the common linking verbs do we see in being used in our second example, looking at letter D? Which one of these words is one of the common linking verbs? All right, and you answered the Ed puzzle question. See, I did it again. I was sneaky. And you told me was is the common linking verb that you found in the sentence. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and did you notice that was is actually already one of the to be helping verbs? It is. Okay, so let's check this out and read it through one more time. Diaz's treatment of the Yoques Indians, why don't we say is? We'll pretend that we're in the present tense. We'll replace it with a different to be linking verb. We know is one of the to be verbs, right? Okay, so let's pretend we're in present tense and we're talking about Diaz because we saw him in real life. So we've traveled back in time and we're using the present tense. Diaz's treatment of the Yoques Indians is cruel and vicious. Does this sentence make sense? It does. It does make sense. So that means that was checks out. It is a linking verb. Yes. So our linking verb for C is became, and our linking verb for D is was. Now, again, to identify the verb, you read the sentence and you see where the action seems to be happening, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and look at one more example. So now I'm actually looking at the book. And we're looking at, this is on page 106, if you would like to follow along physically in front of you, but go ahead and keep looking at the video. Let's look at our example E. Diaz looked at the people. Okay, so let's go ahead and conduct our same test. We're going to take the verb looked and we're going to replace it with a to be verb. So Diaz was. Let's just use any of them. Was, is, am, are. Okay, so we have four of them here that we can use. And we are testing letter E, right? And looked is the common linking verb in the sentence. So now we're testing the sentence. Is looked acting as a linking verb or is it acting as the action verb? Let's conduct our test. Diaz looked at the people. All right, so let's test looked. We're going to replace it with our to be helping verb. Diaz was at the people. Diaz is at the people. Diaz am at the people. And Diaz are at the people. None of those make sense, right? Was at the people. Is at the people. That doesn't make sense. Diaz am at the people. That one definitely does not make sense. And Diaz are at the people. Remember, because we're pretending and we're replacing looked with these words. None of these make sense. Diaz be at the people. No, that doesn't work either, right? Okay, so this sentence has failed our test. Okay, so if this sentence has failed our test, then is looked in this sentence, is looked a linking verb? You have answered the Ed puzzle question and you have answered correctly, I hope. And you have said that this sentence has no linking verb. And that is why this sentence did not pass any of our tests. Okay. And remember, where did we get this test? From our notes, right? So to tell whether a verb is a linking verb, we're going to replace it with some form of the verb to be up here. Okay. So you have had some time to practice with me and you now have your homework. So let's go ahead and take our grammar things and put them off to the side. So our linking verbs are done and ready to go. All right, now your best bet is to finish your practice questions before you come to class tomorrow. So tomorrow, when you get your review questions, you are confident in your skills and you will have already practiced. So you're ready to perform better in your review questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and take out our historical text. Our notes are always good to have next to us when we are practicing what we've learned. All right, so again, pause the video until you have things ready, then press play. You have pressed play, you have your things around you. Excellent. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this. Now, two of my classes, I have 4 classes altogether. 2 of you have already gone through the entire article with me. And 2 of you did not get to read the article in class. So if you are the 2 classes that already read the article, I'm going to read through the article one more time. And I'm not going to go step by step the way we did in class, because in class, we were reading it together as a group. So now I'm going to read the rest of the article to you. So for 2 of my classes, you've heard part of this before. Go ahead and listen to it again, now that you know what questions you are answering right now. And for my 2 classes that didn't get to finish reading this with me, we're going to read through it right now. So let's go ahead and check this out. All right, so a wave of immigration, the late 1800s in the United States. So we remember that immigration means moving from one country to another. We already read through the first introduction paragraph and through our first section of this article. And it's a historical article, but it is an article. And we already looked at this first graphic image, which we had already said is a timeline that shows us the wave of immigration, right? The increase of people that are coming to the United States. All right, so let's go ahead and read through the rest of this article together. Again, if you've already read through this, it doesn't hurt to listen to it, and you get to find more information that maybe you didn't catch the first time for answering your questions. So everybody wins. All righty, so I'm going to go ahead and just use my finger then. Where immigrants came from. And we know this is the title of our second section. Between 1870 and 1901, people began immigrating to the United States from places other than Northern and Western Europe. Around 1890, many people from Southern and Eastern Europe, such as Austria, Poland, Hungary, Italy, Greece, Spain, and Russia, came to the United States in search of a new and better life. Immigrants from Asian nations also began settling here in the United States. Now remember, Northern and Western Europe, that was where people were mostly coming from before the 1800s. And we learned that in our introduction paragraph, right? All right, so let's go ahead and switch over. So now that we know how many immigrants are coming to America, now we get to know where they are from, which is nice. Where immigrants chose to settle in the United States depended in part on their native land. So where were they coming from? For example, Asian immigrants arrived in the United States by sailing across the Pacific Ocean. And we know the Pacific Ocean is on the west coast of the United States, where California is. So the people from Asian nations would settle on the west coast because that is where their boats would land. Immigrants also tended to settle or find a place to live in America in areas where they were likely to find other people from their homelands. And this is where we have our second graphic feature in this article. So on the left-hand side, we have, and this is like a graphic organizer. It's organizing information for us. And we don't have complete sentences, right? We just have like a list going on here. So we know this is a graphic feature. On the left, we have where immigrants came from, and on the right, where they settled. So we're starting to see that there are big groups of people that are settling in cities. Some of them are settling in rural or farm areas. Some of them, again, are focusing in urban areas, cities like New York and Chicago. And then we have China and Japan. Immigrants from those countries are mostly hanging out in California. San Francisco is in California. And here we have a caption. This chart illustrates where some immigrant groups settled once they arrived in the United States. But we knew that because we have this paragraph up here. All right, so now we're looking at our third section for this article, living and working conditions. Once in the United States, many immigrants who settled in cities lived with relatives in crowded, dirty, poorly constructed apartment buildings. Several families often shared one bedroom, and apartments had no lights and no running water. Say, what? That does not sound like a fun place, right? Disease spread quickly, and the chances of injury or death were very high in these poorly constructed buildings. Those who settled on farms in rural areas were often very isolated and alone, and the conditions, such as a lack of running water, were just as challenging. All right, so thinking about how these people are living, would you say that this is a two thumbs up? Yeah, that's a great situation. 10 out of 10 would recommend. My two classes that have already read this paragraph are going, no, no, boo. And hopefully everyone is saying, no, this does not sound like a good experience, right? Housing, however, was not the biggest problem for most immigrants. Finding a job was often more difficult, or the job they found was dangerous and paid very low wages. Although most immigrants did not speak English, they did find work. In rural areas, many worked on farms or built railroads or canals. In cities, they often worked in factories. If you are doing heavy labor, building railroads or building a canal is something, think of the Hoover Dam. Have you seen the Hoover Dam before? It's kind of close to where we are. Think of how much concrete is in that structure. A canal is a waterway where boats can sail through. So it's like a boat can go through part of land through a canal. So if there is no river, instead of going all the way around a country, you can dig a canal and then a boat can sail through it. This is hard labor. This is big stuff, right? You're having to move a lot of land, maybe set off dynamite, right? So factories are also not good places to work at this time. These are dangerous, heavy machinery. It's huge. There's no work protection for these employees, right? So these are not good jobs, but it's the only jobs they can find. In almost all cases, the working conditions were poor and the workdays were extremely long. Factories had poor lighting and no windows, and the machines were very dangerous. However, most people had no choice but to work in those conditions. Those were the only jobs they could find. In fact, most families could not survive on one salary. So children and women often had to work. Losing a job or being injured were constant concerns. So before we go to the next page, I want to take a moment. And again, my two classes that have already read this is a good reminder for those that haven't read this yet with me. Go ahead and take a pencil and down here in this negative space, write the word wages and salary. So these are two words that we read just a moment ago in these last two paragraphs, right? So most families could not survive on one salary alone. And in the paragraph above, we saw that the work that they found was very dangerous and paid very low wages. So when we are talking about wages and salary, we're talking about money that is earned by doing work. So these are specialized terms that you may not know a lot about because you do not work for a company, but these are good things to know in the future as you look at other historical texts, and you'll see them again. Okay, so are immigrants in these conditions, these immigrants that we are talking about, do they have really high wages and a really awesome salary? Are they getting paid a lot of money for their hard work in these extremely poor conditions? No, they are not, right? So again, we're talking about the living and working conditions of these immigrants. Their living conditions here, not very good living conditions, and then working conditions here, not very good working conditions, right? Really bad, horrible. Okay, so we're talking about these experiences. Now, let's keep it in the back of our mind. Are we talking about one family or one person and their experiences? Or are we talking about many people? Maybe even, dare I say, millions of people. All right, so this is a good thing to remember, especially because when we previewed this reading, we saw one of our questions was about what do we think? Is this source a primary source or a secondary source? And you have to come up with evidence to support that. All right, let's check out the last two paragraphs. The end of the wave. Changes in the 1910s brought the massive wave of immigration to an end. In 1914, the number of immigrants arriving from Europe declined uh, with the onset of World War I. And we know onset means beginnings. Let's go ahead and write that up here, just in case you didn't know or hadn't heard it in a while. Onset is the beginning of something, to begin, or beginning. All right, so because of the onset or the beginning of World War I, it's one of the reasons why there was such a sharp decline or reduced number of people coming to the United States. Also, an anti-immigration movement had begun in the United States. Many people were unhappy about the overwhelming number of immigrants and claimed that immigrants were poorly educated and taking jobs away from Americans. Yeah, but are these jobs that most people want to do? No. However, you still have American citizens that were upset. And there are at least 25 billion people that just appeared in the United States, right? Over the course of what, 60 years? Do we see that? So check this out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 million 11, 14 million, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22. And that's just from counting the first digit here, right? At least 22. And then we have all the half millions here. So we have 25 million people that have shown up. And of course, we're going to have a few American people that might be a bit unhappy, like, hey, they're making it hard to find houses, maybe. When you have a greater amount of people, sometimes it's hard to find a job. In 1917, Congress passed laws that required immigrants over the age of 16 to pass a literacy test. Literacy. That sounds like literature, right? So literacy, yeah, is talking about reading and writing in English and knowing some basic culture things like literature. Later, and if you don't know English, what are your chances of passing that test and being able to come into the United States? Probably not very high, right? Later, Congress set quotas, which put limits on the number of immigrants who could enter from different countries. The huge and rapid growth the United States experienced through immigration had ended. Immigration continued to decline during the global depression of the 1930s and through World War II, and would never again rise to the numbers seen in previous years. All right, so this is the end of our article. Again, if you had already read that, you have a nice reminder now. Hopefully you caught a few clues that maybe you missed the first time. So let's go ahead and answer these questions. Now, again, 2 of my classes, you already had time to work on this. And 2 of my classes, we already read this question together. So let's go ahead and read it one more time, and then you'll have time on your own to work on this after we're done with our Edpuzzle, or you can pause the Edpuzzle and work on it. Okay? So again, based on context, what does the word quota mean? Now, whenever we're thinking about context, we're looking for clues, right? We're looking for clues or suggestions or ideas that will help us understand something that maybe we don't really know very well or know already, right? So when we run into a word that we don't know, look for context clues. So you're looking for things around the word you're focusing on. So somewhere around the word or the idea that you don't know. And we're looking for clues to help us with create an idea about what that mystery word or mystery idea might be. All right, so let's go and check this out. Later, Congress set quotas, which put limits on the number of immigrants who could enter from different countries. Based on the context, what does the word quota mean? Don't Google it. Again, this is based on the context, right? So in this context, what does quota mean? So let's look at the words around our mystery, right? What are we not sure about? So, which put limits, because we have the word limits on. So there's some limits that are being put on something. And we have the word later Congress set. Congress set. Okay, so what does Congress do in the government of the United States? Is it responsible for making sure that all of the judges are doing their job? What does Congress do? They get together and they write things, right? Think about the English Parliament. Parliament has a job to create something and then the king enforces it, right? And we saw in our history class the French monarchy. Again, if you haven't gone through our history work yet for this week, you might not know, but the new constitution, the constitutional monarchy, you have the king or the queen, the monarch, and then you have a constitution. So you have a group of people that are responsible for writing laws, right? So Congress is responsible for writing laws. So if Congress set quotas that put limits on the number of immigrants who could enter the different countries, what do we think a quota might be? If Congress creates laws, perhaps a quota is part of, maybe it's part of a law, right? Okay. And it's a limit on the number. Remember, this is limiting the number of immigrants who could enter. All right, so go ahead, and if you did not get a chance to answer this question, go ahead and answer that question. Again, you want to make sure to follow those RAP steps whenever you are answering questions. So let's go ahead and restate the question. Based on the context, the word quota, and if you've already had time to work on this with me, double check your writing. Did you use those RAP steps? Edit your work. Okay. So based on the context, the word quota means or seems to mean and you're going to answer that question. So we already restated the question. Awesome. Remember, RAP, it's like a little checklist for us. All right, go ahead and pause the video if you need more time to answer number one. You have pressed play. You're ready for number two. Okay, so for number two, we're reading this passage, and then we're going to think about what is the overall structure of the passage. Okay, so now we're going to take some time and which class was it? I think it was my online class, my second period. You already got to hear this explained very well. I'm going to give a bit of a summary right now, okay? So we're trying to figure out what is the structure of the passage. Now, I'm going to ask you right now, how many structures are there in historical text? How many ways do we have to organize information for historical text, as we have seen in our notes? You just answered the Edpuzzle question. See, I was sneaky and I asked you a question inside of the recording. All right, so you know that there are three structures, right? We have chronological, and let's actually go ahead and check that out in our notes just to make sure we totally understand and are connecting our memory to visuals that we have there. So we have chronological structure where information is being presented in the exact order that they happened. We have compare and contrast structure. So we're looking at similarities and differences. Again, this is how we organize the information. And then we have our event and effect structure. So what was the event? What happened? And then because of that event, what are some other things that happened because of, right? So we have cause and effect. So we have event and the result, right? The things that happened because of that event. The event and then the result. Okay, so we are going to think about these three structures or ways to organize information. And a big clue that I want to give to you is, remember, in history, we always have to talk about years. So whenever you see years or whenever you see a timeline, don't assume that the entire article is chronological, because this article is not chronological. This article is talking about a time period, and yes, we do have data or information, and that information is laid out in chronological order, but that's just the picture, right? We have an entire section of our article that doesn't even mention years. See that? Living and working conditions, check that out. Do we see any years in here? Anywhere in there, does it talk about, well, first the living conditions were the worst, and then the working conditions were the worst, and after that, and did it give us years? No. Okay. So again, the title can be a really big clue to thinking about this article. Is this article chronological? It presents all of the information in exactly the order it happened in time? No. So we only have two options then. Are we looking at a compare and contrast, similarities and differences between different groups, or different events or different years, or are we looking at an event and then looking at the different results of that event? Go ahead and tell me, which one do you think it is? All right, so let's check out this title one more time. A Wave of Immigration, the late 1800s in the United States. Are we talking about more than one wave of immigration in this article? Or are we just talking about this time period? Remember, when you compare and contrast, when you look for similarities and differences, then you're really comparing two different groups. Now, or two different time periods or two different people. Now, this article mentions other people, right? But nowhere in this article does it say the similarities between these groups is, right? We don't see any of these signal words like alike or similarities or both groups or unlike, right? We don't really see any of those trigger words or any of those words that are clues for us, right? So this article is actually an event and a result. Now, because history has already happened, it can be a little confusing to think about, well, I don't understand. The event happened first and then we had the results. Yes, but that's how it always happens, right? First you have an event and then you have the result of the event. Okay, so let's check this out. The event is the wave, this increase in immigration. This is the event. And then we are looking at the results on the United States, in the United States. What happened, right? So we have an immigration rush in the late 1800s. So this section, this first section, is the event. This is the thing. Without this event, without all of those difficulties in other parts of the world, pushing these people to find a different place to live, without all of these millions of people coming to the United States, we wouldn't have the other two sections, three sections, right? Without this increase of people coming to the United States, we wouldn't have to talk about where they came from. Without these millions, billions, no millions, just millions, without these millions of people coming to the United States, we wouldn't have to talk about how they were living or working in the US, right? Once they got to the United States, this is how they were living. See, once in the United States. So again, this section is the result. Because these people are in the United States, this is the kind of living and the kind of working they were able to do. And again, we have this result. Where are these people coming from? Our second section is also a result. Because all these people came to America, we were noticing where they were coming from. If no one came, then why would we care? All right, and then we have this last section, the end of the wave. If there was no wave, why would we talk about the end of it? Right? So even this last section also is talking about the result. Because all of these people came to the United States, it was overwhelming the number of people that came to the United States. Because of that, Americans started complaining. Many people were in America were unhappy because of this huge number of immigrants. If there were no immigrants coming to the United States, then this whole paragraph, none of this would have happened, right? Okay, so we have an effect and we have the results. So we know what the structure is. So let's go ahead and practice our AP steps. Again, let's go ahead and write that little checklist over here on the right-hand side. Again, my two classes that got to read through this with me already, this is a chance for you to check yourself, okay? Double check your work. Make sure you double check your knowledge. Okay, so let's check out this paragraph again. The years after the end of the Civil War saw a massive wave of immigration to the United States. Difficulties in other parts of the world, such as economic problems, so being able to find jobs, political unrest, so having freedoms in your government and in your country, famine, not having food, and religious persecution, so being discriminated against because of your religion. All of those things increased or fueled this rush to the United States. Okay, so is this paragraph talking about the event, or is this paragraph talking about what happened after the event? All right, you have answered the Edpuzzle video, and you said event. Yes, you are correct. This is not the result. This is the whole purpose of the article, right? People came to the United States, 25 million people to be exact, to find better lives. This is the event. This is the reason for the whole article. Okay, so how does this paragraph fit into the structure? All right, so let's go ahead and follow our RAP steps. So we restate the question. This paragraph fits into the, and what kind of structure was it again? This is a cause and effect structure. So this paragraph fits into the cause and effect structure because this paragraph is discussing, is this paragraph discussing the cause, the event, or is this paragraph discussing the effect, which we were saying is the result? I'll write those words above here so we don't get confused. All right, and we have the second part to our sentence. Oh, let's go ahead and pause the video until you finish your sentence. We have our sentence starter here, so we restated the question. Now you are going to answer it. Pause the video until you have your sentence and your thought written down. All right, you have pressed play. So now let's go ahead and check out the second part. And how does this paragraph support the central idea? So the central idea is that there was a wave of immigration. There was a huge increase in people coming to the United States. So how does this paragraph support the main idea? All right, so let's go ahead and again restate the question. This paragraph supports the main idea, central idea, same thing. The main idea because this paragraph is explaining what is this paragraph explaining? This paragraph is explaining why the rush happened, right? This paragraph is talking about why people were coming to the United States. Two reasons. There are two reasons why people were coming to the United States. One, because of the things that were in their countries, and two, because of what they were hoping for when they got to the United States, right? Okay, so go ahead and pause the video while you are writing your ideas down. And when you are done writing your ideas down, press play. You have pressed play. All right, so let's go ahead and check out number 3. So we already know that number 3 is asking about the timeline. Read this question. You already read the timeline together. So pick the answer that best fits. What additional information does the timeline give us? So we know that this question is saying, well, which year did we have the greatest number, the greatest increase? Besides the greatest increase, what other information does the timeline give us? All right, and then we have question 4. So we're talking about a primary source or a secondary source. Now, we already have our suspicions, and now that we've read and really analyzed the source, we can solidly say this is a secondary source, so we know it is. But we're listing two pieces of evidence to show why this is a secondary source. Now, we've already done this sort of activity before in our notes, right? So again, we're looking at our notes, and we see these two examples, right? We have a primary example and a secondary example. How could we prove this was a secondary source? We have all of this lovely graphic organizer here, so we have many things to think about. The big one I want to point you to is the author. Who is the author? Were they alive in the 1800s? Are they sharing their own experience? Or is the author giving us information about people and about events from the past? And they're giving us this information through having done a lot of research, right? So remember, secondary sources, going back to the first page, are researched and written after the event. So when you do a lot of research, you're looking at many different primary and secondary sources, right? And that's how you get information about so many people, not just one person. All right, so go ahead and make sure you have at least two pieces of evidence to explain how you knew or why you know that this source is a secondary source. Pause the video while you write down your ideas and then press play when you are ready to move on. All right, you are ready to move on. Now, this is where you might be saying, Miss Van Pelt, this is the last question. What are we going to do now? Now we're going to flip this page over and we're going to read the first two paragraphs of this second source. So we have a new source. We're not going to preview the whole thing. We're just going to look at a bit of it. So we know that an excerpt is a piece, right? So this is a piece from a bigger story. And the bigger story is the life story of a Polish sweatshop girl. Just in case you don't know what a sweatshop is, this is a factory or a location that conducts business, usually in making some sort of clothing, and illegally has children working for them. So this is a place where you do not have safe practices. Children are at risk. They're being injured all the time, and children are usually being abused. They don't have enough time to rest or to eat or to sleep, and they're having to work all the time. So this is the story of a girl from Poland. That's Polish, what that means, if you've never seen that before. So she comes from the country of Poland. And again, this is from a book called The Life Stories of Undistinguished Americans as Told by Themselves. Now, what is our goal? Our goal is to read the first two paragraphs of this source and ask ourselves, is this source a primary source, or is this source a secondary source? This is our main goal. Is this source primary or secondary? And you are going to explain why, okay? And trust me, with two paragraphs, we will be able to do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and read together. Again, you should have this in front of you. When I was a little more than 10 years of age, my father died. He was a good man and a steady worker, and he never knew what it was to be hungry while he lived. So he never went hungry, right? After he died, troubles began. For the rent of our shop was about $6 a month, and then there were food and clothes to provide as well. We needed little, it is true, but even soup, black bread, and onions we could not always get. We struggled along till I was nearly 13 years of age and quite handy at housework. I was very good at that. And at shopkeeping. I was good at helping my mom run the shop or helping my family run the shop. So far as I could learn all of those skills there. But we fell behind in the rent, And mother kept thinking more and more that we should have to leave Poland and to go across the sea to America, where we heard it was much easier to make money. Mother wrote to Aunt Fanny, who lived in New York, and told her how hard it was to live in Poland. So there's a few things going on here, right? So we see that there's an economic problem. So the rent for the shop is $6 a month, but the family is having a hard time meeting that. And we have this Polish girl already told us that sometimes there was some kinds of food that were hard to get. So maybe there was a food problem in this country as well. So we wrote to our aunt and told her how hard it was to live in Poland. And Aunt Fanny advised her, my mom, to come and to bring me. I was out at service at this time, and mother thought she would leave me. So I had a good place and come to this country alone, sending for me afterward. But Aunt Fanny would not hear of this. She said we should both come at once. And she went around among our relatives in New York and took up a subscription for our passage. So this means Aunt Fanny went around their relatives or their people, their family and their countrymen, the other people from Poland in New York, and she collected money so that this girl and her mom could come to the United States together. We came by steerage on a steamship in a very dark place that smelt dreadfully. There were hundreds of other people packed in this one space in the ship with us, men, women, and children, and almost all of them were sick. It took us 12 days to cross the sea, and we thought we should die. It was so horrible. But at last the voyage was over, and we came up and saw the beautiful bay and the water and the big woman with the spikes on her head and the lamp that is lighted at night in her hands, goddess, or in her hand, goddess of liberty. So she came from Europe, so she's arriving on the east coast of the United States. We know we're going somewhere near New York to meet up with their family. What statue is she trying to describe here? A big woman with spikes on her head and a lamp that is lighted at night in her hand, the goddess of liberty. What statue is she describing here? You have written your answer in the Edpuzzle question. Awesome. Now, just from reading this first page, is this source a primary source or a secondary source? Again, if you're not sure, if you're having a hard time, go back to your notes, look at your second page, and look at this graphic organizer. Is this text a primary source or is this text a secondary source? So let's look for clues. Is the author telling us about their own experience, or is the author giving us information after the event? Maybe they weren't even present, right? Okay, so remember, go ahead and use these clues. We have first person and third person. How is the story written? Again, other words for first person would be are. Again, that includes I in it. It includes myself. Okay, so you have the tools to answer this question, and you know that you're going to have to find two pieces of evidence to prove your idea. So if you think this source is secondary, you have to write in the very last question of our historical practice text practice packet on Canvas, you have to write in that answer and tell me why you think it's secondary. If you think this source, the life story of a Polish sweatshop girl, if you think this source is a primary source, you need to write using RAP steps and give me two pieces of evidence, two reasons why you think this source is primary or why you think it's secondary. All right, so let me go ahead and show you where that is, just in case you are not sure and haven't seen it yet. So everyone is going to, if you haven't already, go ahead and go to Canvas. Once you go to your Canvas page, click obviously on English, click on modules, and then scroll down to Wednesday. So this is what you clicked to watch the video, linking verbs practice activity. So those are these 10 questions, excuse me, you don't know how many questions there are. Those are questions that I have selected from your practice questions. So go ahead and click on that activity and put your answers in. But for historical text, you're going to be clicking on historical text practice packet questions. And the very last question is asking you about this second source. The last two questions are asking you to put your answers to the questions I asked you in the video into that assignment on Canvas, okay? All right, so you know what you're doing, you know when to turn these things in. Let's go ahead and chat about your homework for a second. So it's all in one place. All right, so your homework is to work on your grammar practice at page 107, C through J, and page 108, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. You have your linking verbs practice activity on Canvas. You saw that. You have about 10 questions there from your practice. Okay. Make sure to put your answers in there. And then you have your historical text practice packet, which we just finished going over and discussing. If you have questions, come to Homework Help, message me on Canvas, email me, or message me on Remind. You have so many ways to get a hold of me. Okay. I never mind questions. I love them. Please don't forget you have some history assignments. So we're going through chapter 7 this week. We touched on chapter 6, but we're going through chapter 7, talking about Toward a New Government is the title of that chapter. But we see a little bit of violence first. So as the National Assembly is creating this Constitution and a Bill of Rights, you have a little bit of violence that's going on at the same time. So two things happening at the same time. So you have a timeline activity there for you to start working on today. And please remember, you do have humanities homework help. So if you have questions or need anything, please, please, please come on over. All righty, that is all I have for you today. If you need anything, please message me. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.